Well, good morning, everyone. I work at Zayo, and I'm responsible for the architecture and planning of Zayo's IP backbone, that's AS6461, as well as our optical network, long haul and intercity. So when I started talking to Betty about providing the bandwidth for this last NANOG and for the ARIN conference, one of my first thoughts was, how much bandwidth should I provide? Zayo is, like many carriers out there, selling gobs and gobs of 100 gigabit circuits, and so I thought, well, maybe a 100 gigabit circuit. But then I thought, well, let's just see how much bandwidth we really need. And so I looked at the MRTG graph at the last NANOG and discovered something very interesting. The folks at NANOG and the folks in this room work to build and scale the biggest, fastest, baddest IP networks on the planet. But as individuals, we really don't use that much bandwidth. So this is the graph on the right here is a graph of the Zayo circuit. We provided a 10 megabit circuit, but the high bar there is actually 400 meg. So we could have provided just a 1 gigabit circuit, 1 gig E, but that just seemed chintzy, so that's why we went with 10 gigabits. So the message here for everyone is that there is a ton of bandwidth sitting out there waiting to be used. So when you're discussing policies that are maybe a little bit boring or not interesting, download some things, go ahead and get Game of Thrones, catch up on some binge watching. We're here for you. I thought I'd also just take a couple minutes here to talk about the cost of optical transport. We obviously have a large DWDM network, and it's growing. This chart shows the actual cost compression for a 100 gigabit circuit on Zayo's network. And I've been a little careful to cover the exact y-axis, but I'll tell you that there has been tens of thousands of dollars of cost compression for a 100 gig circuit. And that's a really, really good thing. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how is that happening and where is it going in the future. So the thing that's driving this cost compression is different kinds of modulation. And the modulation schemes have these kind of complicated sounding names like QPSK or 16 QAM. Let me just translate it into how much capacity per channel. So the current most common bandwidth that's out there today is QPSK, which is a 100 gigabit channel. 8 QAM is 150 gigabit, 16 QAM is 200 gigabit channels. The interesting thing about these higher modulation schemes, so that it's more bandwidth per channel, right? 200 gigabits per channel is twice as much. But the result of that, due to physics of light and things like that, is that you don't send the signal as far. You don't have the same reach. I'm sure everyone knows that in an optical network, one of the costs that you want to avoid is when you have to convert the signal from the optical domain into the electrical domain, back into the optical domain. That's known as a regeneration. Regens are expensive, and regens kill your economics. So the interesting thing about these new modulation schemes is that they have different distances that they can travel before you need to regen. So if you look at this graph, the y-axis is terabits of capacity of the line system, and the x-axis is distance going from 100 to 4,000 kilometers. And that long line that extends almost the entire way across represents a 100 gigabit channel. So as you can see, you can send a 100 gigabit signal 4,000 kilometers without regen, which is an amazing thing these days. The higher capacity modulation schemes have lower distances, smaller distances. You could see one of them is about 1,800 kilometers, and then the most capacity goes the shortest distance without regen. That'd be 16 QAM that can go about 600 kilometers. So what does that mean for a service provider? It gets more complicated to build your optical network if you're trying to have the lowest cost per bit. So imagine a hypothetical system going from, say, Los Angeles to Phoenix to Dallas. right? For traffic that's going from Los Angeles to Phoenix, we'd want to use 16 QAM. We'd want to use 200 gigabit channels because that gets us the most capacity for the least cost. That's the lowest cost per bit. But for traffic that's going from Los Angeles through Phoenix all the way to Dallas, we need to use a modulation scheme that's not as high in terms of capacity, but that gets us the longer reach. So this all becomes quite complicated when you're trying to plan out a network, and also when you don't know what your demand is, what's coming down the line. It means that you have to be pretty flexible with how you do your channel planning. So that's probably more information about optical networks than you wanted this early in the morning, but I just wanted to share with you what some of the things that service providers have to deal with. That's the end of my remarks, so just want to say thank you for the few minutes and have a great conference.
Very good, very informative. Okay, happy to have such large amount of connectivity to the conference for all of you who are going to be doing torrents and Bitcoin mining in your spare time.